What happens to phosphorus, which is a nutrient which is exceeded in most of the fields in which they're spreading now? This particular aspect requires the phosphorus is attached to the particles. I'll let you decide again. ADEQ argues that these following locations are impacted, and eutrophication means the stream itself it's just messed up. It doesn't smell good. It doesn't look good. Here's some springs. A spring that lies very close to Big Creek. This was before the capo even started. This is a condition that suggests to us that we need to look at these valleys, and especially we need to be very protective of the river itself. A couple of items under the big rainfall we had. Here's a spring, and I don't know if it's dark enough. This area, there's springs that pop up all over these fields because they're separated. Water's flowing uphill. It's under artesian pressure. It comes out of the chert, it comes out of the limestone. The church held it in, and it's like a drinking fountain. And this is the area that the man had the 21 calves that were challenged. Here's the capo again. Here's the area where they're spreading, and this defines the area of where the illnesses are reported. Those are a few questions. I cannot stand up here and tell you for sure that that is all due to the capo, but that's the biggest, that's the elephant in the room. That's the thing we need to concern ourselves with. So here are the solutions, and I believe 26 minutes, Jenny. I haven't seen your sign yet. I am almost there. I am on a tight schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, when I talk, there are a few students in the back of the room. They will tell you that seldom am I ever on time, but tonight I'm going to be. We need to utilize the best science we possibly can. We need to use dye tracing. We need to use karst inventorying. We need to bring this information out to the public and educate people. We need to expand the sampling of the springs that we look at. We don't need to look at springs that are right next to the farm. That they certainly have some unique attributes, but we've traced, by dye tracing, we traced some of these springs lie in basins on the other side of Big Creek. They lie beneath a high topographic ridge. Does water flow uphill and then back downhill? That's a big nay, ladies and gentlemen. It's moving from high levels through the limestone, and the limestone is tilted, and it's constrained by chert, flint, and it just pops right out, and there's a big spring over in the next valley, and my golly, it pops out. So those are conditions that are very important. We need background information. We need to go out and require this, and ADEQ needs to know that these are things that we need. Whether we're up in the Buffalo National River or we're over in the Mississippi Delta, these are types of studies. This is information that is essential for us to preserve our sacred state waters. And storm hydrology, I've said enough about it. Equitable treatment for all study teams. I contend that those pieces of information, they need to be there. I have written a significant number of letters and voluntary offerings to governors, to heads of the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, to legislators. I have heard zero response the entire time. I'm told that, oh, well, Brahana, we're considering Dr. Brahana's ideas. I have not had any conversation with any of these individuals. So, for your letters, write the governor and say, what's going on? What's going on here? And all research, open, transparent, like any science. I can stand up here and I can tell you anything. If this can't be repeated, it's not good science. So let's follow these approaches, and I contend that we will have some answers. And then, most important, the health and safety, not only of the farmers along this valley, but all individuals who utilize this river for recreation and a special place. I see that I'm being waved at, and what I'm going to tell you is this: we all live downstream. What that means is, no matter where we are, if we do whatever we want on our property, if I want to dump the oil from my car on the ground, it has an impact somebody somewhere downstream. So here's my final suggestion. Because the water doesn't flow uphill, well, water doesn't flow uphill if it's not confined. But if it is confined, as it is in the Boone Formation, it can rise above the level of that karst aquifer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I'll have a lot of fun.
I have the worst job I've ever had before, trying to cut off Dr. Brahana. I would love to hear more. Time for some questions. There's a microphone in the central aisle, and if you've been in situations like this before, people can line up behind that microphone, and we'll get as many questions as possible covered.
I'd like to add, too, that there is a group letter to the governor that some women are circulating, and if you would sign it, it's kind of like the collection plate. We're collecting your signatures, so if you would sign on. And if people would just line up here, if you have questions, that way we can save time rather than passing the mic around.
So we have Dr. Brahana here for questions, and also Gordon Watkins of the BRWA.
I'd like to start with a question. I'd like to just you to clarify the slide you had about Big Creek saying that there was no degradation, and then you followed that there was quite a bit of impairment. And some of that data is actually from Big Creek, but yet they say it's not impaired.
The overall statement, let's see if I'm back on again. Does it sound like I'm on again?
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk loudly then, because I'm good at that. The impairment that is described, typically many individuals feel that we've got to have a long-term data. Did I bump something? Technology. I'm an old guy. Please cut me some slack. The group itself wants to be very careful. The group itself has special interests. It is moderated by lobbyists and people who are looking for, give us more time, we need more time. And many of those arguments seem to be repetitive. The aspects of what we've seen, you saw from some of that previous figure, when the rainfall comes, we see a range of water quality analyses all over the board. But in fact, if we collect it at essentially the same general times, we're seeing exceedance of contaminated zones. The aspects, the way BCRET got their funding, the Farm Bureau, and this is my great-grandfather's Farm Bureau, went down, they talked to Governor Beebe, and they said, you need to get in and you need to do this study. And he said, okay. And there were several people that recommended my name. I am not the only person who studies karst by any means. It does not have to be me, but it does need to be somebody who knows. They excluded that for that particular reason. So those are just a few opinions. Those are my opinions. I'm sure they would like to come forth with their own defense, but in my case, that's what I see. Yes, next question.
Thank you, Dr. Brahana. I'm curious about, with the dye tracing, which is really interesting to me, that you're doing, will that tease apart specifically the nutrient and some of the pathogens that would come from the farm versus any other source? Can you tease that apart with the dye tracing?
The dye tracing is essentially just like a fingerprint, and we have, from the dye we put in one immediately across the road from where the hog capo exists, and that showed up in the stream. We put it into a well, and I've been quite, why would you put something in a well when we're spreading the waste on the field? But the fact of the matter is the well is directly connected to the groundwater very rapidly. That moved through, and the velocities were in the range of 1,500 to 2,500 feet per day. And it came out in Big Creek, a short distance away. The other component you had was there was another site that was down there close to where the spreading fields occurred, and that allowed us, we had an absolutely huge rainfall. We had 13 inches in 3 days, and it raised the water level up, and that raised water level is what got the locations in other sites. So yes, that's where we are going to sample those particular sites.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Dr. Brahana, my name is Dwayne Wolchen. I'm an engineer, live here in Fayetteville. And I took a look at the 3 watersheds that we believe are impaired: Big Creek, Mill Creek, and
Bear Creek.
Bear Creek. And I discovered that they constitute approximately 14% of the Buffalo River's watershed.
Yes.
Yes. And now we're talking about adding yet another watershed contributing to the Buffalo River. That would be the Little Buffalo. When you add all that up, that's 24.9% of the Buffalo River watershed that is contributing to the degradation of the Buffalo River. Please comment on that. Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, the key word is concentrated, and the more, with rainfall, the first particular hog factory may not completely knock the socks off of the data. But in fact, with time, as Dwayne just mentioned, that's essentially 25% of the Buffalo's watershed is going to be impacted. And overall, the overall concerns to me are that we need to be very, very careful. We need to keep any future locations that have concentrated animal feeding operations out of that drainage basin, and we need to get the existing one out of that, or have somehow get rid of all the water quality problems. Yes.
Dr. Brahana, my question is kind of related to that. If they are going to spread on these other 600 acres that are going to then go into Shop Creek and also into the Little Buffalo, we don't know anything about the quality of those streams. They haven't been, as far as I know, monitored. Is there any kind of baseline now? Because once they start spreading, we'll be right back where we were. And also, what about the Big Creek study? Because aren't they gonna be kind of left high and dry if they're spreading somewhere else? And will that make them look like everything's just peachy up there?
That's an excellent question, and yes, it's very likely that particular, the study, the Big Creek Research and Extension Team study
Of the Division of Agriculture.
does not, it's not going to be able to encompass the existing new fields that have been proposed. And those new fields have had no background research. We have a few data points at this stage. We've got plenty to do, but that's a very valid point. I mean, we need to. If you feel the same as I do, then share that with the governor, share that with the director of ADEQ. Yes.
I just wanted to remind everybody that Gordon Watkins from the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance is also available for the non-scientific questions. So some people may have some questions about what the heck's going on. So you can line up for those questions as well. Just wanted to, not to.
Sure.
There's just so much information that we need to share in such a short time. And I do want to remind people that afterwards that we'll be here, but we have to be out of here by 8 o'clock, and I mean out the door. And that afterwards, some people are going over to the Chancellor Lounge and Restaurant off the square for an informal discussion. So I hope some of y'all will come on over there.
Just as an aside, while I'm here, Gordon Watkins is an amazing amount of information. He has headed this particular watershed alliance and has been responsible for so many of the good things that have happened. And I would encourage you to avail yourselves to ask those questions if you have any questions associated with those. Yes.
At the recent hearing in Jasper last week, specifically about the expansion of the fields into the Little Buffalo watershed, ADEQ, they made several interesting statements. Things like, we're going to try to get by these fields and see what we can see. They said, we have a couple of geologists on staff and they may take a look at it. But the argument they gave, and there is a question in my statement here in a minute, the argument they gave was that other than sinkholes and obvious karst topology, they weren't aware that karst existed there, and that in any case, a field, dirt, was capable of taking that waste and fixing it. Could you just speak a little bit to how much soil it takes for that amount of waste to actually clean it before it hits the water table?
That's, again, another excellent question. The soil is fine-grained, it's got clays, so when the rainwater, when the waste, all of that goes through, theoretically, it attaches, it gets sorbed, it gets filtered. In this particular case, there have been a variety of studies. There are some places where the thickness of the clay and soil may be greater than 10 feet. In a lot of cases there, it is not. It's less than a foot in a few places. We have some rock outcrops in the fields where the man had problems with his cattle, with his calves. That particular statement, though, I would say we have evidence, we have information, we are ignoring the wisdom we have gained from studies elsewhere that have had karst settings where they have done these kinds of dumping, nutrient management, and the result is that it has not resulted. You need a clean, you need an area that has a thick soil, you need an area that is not underlain by open, rapid karst movement of water in the subsurface, in the groundwater. Next question.
Okay, you may have already partly answered this, but In the brochure, it says that water usually moves 10 to 15 feet a year, and yet it's been shown there to be moving 2,500 feet a day. That's because of the cars?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. That is because of the cars. As it moves through, it's still getting through openings and voids, but it's got to expend energy. It's got to, and these are details that I'm guessing this audience is not as enthused about as I am. But it has to overcome friction. It's got to essentially overcome those. The fact that it is so open and so widespread is very, very important. Thank you.
I feel kind of silly asking this question, but could you tell this audience how many springs and positive dye sites we actually have within the Buffalo River watershed? Not the Buffalo River itself, the national park.
Within the national park, I believe this is one of the members of the KHBNR team, and she has been a godsend in the fact that she has gotten us, and please, she has allowed us to get onto property that we would not have any other way, because people, they don't know me from Adam. And because of her question, from that high water dye tracing study we did, I believe there were 7 actual measurements in the Buffalo from that dye that we put in at that high water, that flooding event, and it pushed the dye out. It pushed it in ways we could not have any idea it would have gone. One general comment I'd like to make is that some of those features downstream may have popped out in other surface streams, but we got positive hits. And this is a fingerprint. I've got a machine that measures the wavelength of that dye, and it is very, very unique. And before we study it, we put out samples, and there was nothing in the water. After we put the dye out, we got a hit, and it's as good as a fingerprint in the FBI doing it. Other comments, questions? Gordon's here. I've hogged the limelight from Gordon, but if not, we have. Yes, we got one. Yes, ma'am.
This might be a question more for Gordon, but here's my question. When this was first set up, when the BCRET team was first set up, as I recall, that was going to be a 5-year study. And it seemed to me that was kind of interesting because it looked like it kind of overlapped that 5-year moratorium. And I thought, well, it looked to me like what was going on is that they set up that study group, and then when the study group came out saying, no problem, the moratorium would be lifted. And then we would pretty much be cooked.
That's a
Well, is that slightly true?
Yeah, I would say that's basically true. The moratorium is pitched to the results of the Big Creek research team. And one of our complaints is that they're relying solely on the Big Creek research and extension team to the exclusion of multiple other sources of data like Dr. Brahana's and the Park Service and the USGS. There's a whole wealth of data out there. ADQ on the one hand says that there's insufficient data to determine impairment, and then they turn right around and they say there's too much data. We can't handle the data that's being collected by the USGS continuously because we're overloaded with data. So pick your poison, I guess. But yeah, we're concerned that 5-year moratorium is going to be dependent on the conclusions reached by the Big Creek Research and Extension team, and that's a big problem.
Thank you, Van, Gordon, and thank you both and everybody else that's been involved in this for doing the work on our behalf here in County.
Quickly, the lagoons there at the farm, we've often wondered about if they're going to overflow during a storm event. Have the lagoons held up, or have they overflowed and caused direct problems like that?
We're not aware of any overflows. I know that there was an inspection done in December after we had those 13 inches of rain, I think. Inspector, you can access that inspection report on the ADQ website and see photos of the ponds, and they're very near the must pump down level. There's a staff gauge in the pond that determines the level, but they were not close to overflowing. And it would take more rain than what we had in that rain event, but that's certainly not unheard of. But there's also the concern of slow seepage from those ponds, and there's good reason to believe that that's actually occurring. And that's kind of more insidious. It's not as dramatic as an overflow and a failure of the ponds or a sinkhole opening up, all of which are possible. But the seepage rate is allowed by the regulations, and like I said, there's reason to believe that seepage is actually occurring and impacting groundwater.
I believe it's time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for showing up. Thank you.
Amazing, we're right on time. If you would like to discuss this some more, again, over at the Chancellor Hotel Lounge, it's 70 Northeast Avenue in Fayetteville. It's 1 block north of the Fayetteville Square. And that will be a much more informal setting, and you're welcome to join us over there after we're finished here. Amazing. Most of you know Still on the Hill. They're famous not only locally, but nationally, and I think even internationally. They're true ambassadors for the Ozarks, and now they're ambassadors for the Buffalo River with their new CD that's coming out. So I would like to invite Still on the Hill to join us.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all. What a treat that was. Thank you. Wow. That's everything we needed to hear right now. We are, this is kind of the very